Vanessa Bell's sister Virginia Woolf, like the character Rhoda in her novel The Waves, was plagued by depression and self-doubt, and Louise de Salvo has linked this to childhood events common to both sisters. This film will examine Vanessa Bell's unique reaction to her childhood through art, environment, lifestyle, and family. Another comparison to be made is the parallel between French Belle Époque rejection of the Académie and the rise in the Edwardian period of independent art clubs, such as Vanessa Bell's Friday Club, as a rejection of Victorian art and culture. George Frederick Watts, for example, who was a friend of Vanessa and Virginia's grandmother, and whose portraits of the sisters' mother hung in the family home in Hyde Park Gate, represented the world of Victorian art, whereas Vanessa's teacher at the Royal Academy, John Singer Sargent, represented the new Impressionist world. Vanessa Bell had been more directly introduced to Impressionism by the publication of Mauclair's book in English in 1903 and a lecture at the Grafton Gallery the following year, and to Post-Impressionism through Clive Bell, whom she had met in 1902 and visited in Paris in 1904, although it was not until the Grafton exhibition of 1910, including the Fauvists, that her work was directly influenced. But in contrast to the Impressionists' revolutionary intent in portraying pure nature or the modern urban world, and the Fauvist transformation of that world into purely formal vocabulary, in much of Bell's work there remains an insistence on largely figurative colour and the expressive content of family and the domestic environment which belies any pure formalism. Having had 3 children, after the death of her first husband, Julia Duckworth remarried and became Julia Stephen, and Vanessa was their first child born at the new family home at 22 Hyde Park Gate, half a mile south of Kensington Palace. The house was far from happy, with Gerald Duckworth sexually abusing Vanessa and Virginia, the sisters' mother dying in 1895, and their older half-sister Stella dying in 1897. From 1881 to 1894, the family had summered in St Ives, in Talland House, and for both Virginia and Vanessa, these summers would provide motifs to which they would return in their work, Virginia in her novel To the Lighthouse, and Vanessa in her paintings on Studland Beach. Vanessa and Virginia had lived mostly in the conservatory at the back of 22 Hyde Park Gate, Vanessa drawing and Virginia writing. In 1896, Vanessa's drawing was shown to the art teacher Arthur Cope, who began to tutor her, Vanessa producing a painting of Brighton in 1897 and starting at the Royal Academy of Painting in 1901. After the beginning of the Edwardian reign in 1901 and the death of their father in 1904, Vanessa, Virginia, Toby and Adrian moved to 46 Gordon Square in Bloomsbury, and a different phase of Vanessa's life began, one of freedom of lifestyle and artistic expression. It was at this time that she organised the Friday Club with other Academy students and studied at the nearby Slade Academy. From a mutual friend, she gained a commission to paint the portrait of Lady Robert Cecil, who was childless and deaf. As Frances Spalding writes in her monograph on Vanessa Bell, the artist conveys her solitariness by accentuating the contained pose. 3 days after the death of her brother Toby of typhoid fever, Clive Bell proposed to Vanessa, and they married in 1907. In 1908, their first son, Julian, was born. For an artist to have their child as a sitter is in no way unusual. Famously, Monet, Renoir, Cézanne, Gauguin, and Matisse, among many others, did this. But in the context of Bell's life and oeuvre, and in the context of the rejection of the life at Hyde Park Gate and the new life forged in Bloomsbury and afterwards in East Sussex, the creation of a society with new ideals and an environment decorated with beauty, this image of a newborn takes on a greater resonance. This work, Iceland Poppies, survived the September 1940 bombing of Vanessa's London studio, as she had kept it at Charleston in East Sussex. The painting was lauded by Sickert and Duncan Grant when it was exhibited at the New English Art Club in 1909. Widely regarded as one of her finest works, and as having been influenced by James McNeill Whistler, it represents, like Whistler's work, a transition between modernism and the preceding period. The largely dechromatized canvas is pared down to a few elements: a group of 3 poppies, one of which is red, a group of 3 objects. These are a medicine bottle, an 18th century French pharmacist's jar, and a bowl. 3 white stripes across the backdrop, and this invites a meaning beyond pure formalism. As Richard Schoen writes in his book on the art of Bloomsbury, Vanessa Bell admitted that she did not pursue abstraction after 1915 because of the added interest subject matter gave her, secondary though it was, noting the range of formal means, psychological content, and subject matter. Dorothy Parker's quip of the Bloomsbury group was that they lived in squares, painted in circles, and loved in triangles. However, after 1916, Bell chose to live in Charleston, deep in the English countryside, and independently pursued her own vision in her figurative canvases. Regarding the latter epithet, after the birth of Julian, Clive fell in love with Virginia, who reciprocated this feeling. Vanessa was caught in this triangle, argues Spalding, stoically accepting the situation for fear of losing either her husband or her sister. Hence, Iceland Poppies, with its frozen tone and associations of sleep, is arguably a reflection of Vanessa's emotional state at this time. Perhaps tellingly, Duncan Grant catalogued the work in 1945 as Poppies and Poison. However, regarding the first part of Dorothy Parker's characterization of the group, Charleston was only Vanessa's permanent home during and just after the First World War, and it is true that Vanessa lived in Bloomsbury from 1904 in Gordon Square. The Thursdays at Home meetings had become, from 1905, the focal point of the Bloomsbury Circle, composed initially of Toby Stevens' friends from Cambridge University. Sachs and Sidney Turner had been part of the group right from the start. The work on the right, 3 branches, is a continuation of Iceland Poppies' tripartite scheme, but also represents an early experiment in the liberation of colour and focus on form, inspired by Bell's contact with the French avant-garde. Vanessa joined Clive in Paris in 1911, purchasing a Picasso painting there, and painting this work, which employs a naturalistic palette but sketch-like facture, and brushwork has been subordinated to large planes of colour in a post-impressionist mode. Bell's work at Asham in East Sussex also benefits from contact with impressionist and post-impressionist work, such as this landscape with haystack from 1912. All of this experimentation culminated in the works at Studland, such as this work, The Bathers, from September 1911, influenced by Maurice Denis, with his rhythmic grouping of figures, including Virginia Woolf lying down on the left in a straw hat. Here, naturalistic colour has given way to large swathes of expressive colour in a carefully balanced compositional form. Similarly post-impressionist is this painting of the Etchells, friends of Duncan Grant. Again, in this work, portraiture and detail have been subordinated to post-impressionist planes of colour. This work, Conversation Piece, sometimes entitled Conversation at Asham, shows a thin facture with brush striations visible, reminiscent of Bonnard's post-impressionist work. And the painting has as its subject matter what is arguably the foundation of the Bloomsbury group: conversation. In the spring of 1912, Vanessa, Clive, and Roger Fry, whom the couple had met in 1910, travelled together to Italy via Paris, returning again with Duncan Grant in May 1913, the latter trip including Ravenna and Venice. Despite being prevented by illness from travelling beyond Florence on the first trip, Bell was influenced by the partial abstraction of the Byzantine style, painting this work in June 1912 with a non-figurative ground and a decorative, transcendental effect. And these same principles are employed in the areas of colour in the work The Spanish Lady. Vanessa's move towards abstraction continued with another work of Studland Bay employing large areas of colour. Spalding has noted the influence of Piero della Francesca's Madonna della Misericordia in the depiction of the beach tent. Matisse's The Dance had dominated the second post-impressionist exhibition, which Roger Fry had organised at the Grafton Gallery in 1912, and Spalding also sees the influence of Matisse's Nu de dos et à trois, or nude from behind, third state, in the right-hand foreground figure. Vanessa had an affair with the art critic Roger Fry, and it was partly under his influence that she progressed towards abstraction in her work in the period from 1912 to 1914. However, of this period, two works stand out as being representative of Vanessa Bell's oeuvre from this period onwards. The first being this work, The Nursery, representing her children Quentin on the left and Julian on the right, and which Bell described in a letter to Fry as using a mosaic of colour. The second such work, in the Courtauld Gallery in London, shows three women by a window in conversation. And despite the rejection of portraiture and the work's treatment of colour as large planes, the emotional effect of the work's subject matter is integral to the work's meaning. Vanessa had stayed at Asham House from 1912 to 1914, and in 1915 stayed at Eleanor House near West Wittering in Sussex. By this time, Vanessa had started her affair with the artist Duncan Grant, with whom she would have a child, Angelica, in 1918. In 1916, Vanessa moved to Wisset Lodge in Suffolk, with some of the Bloomsbury group moving there too to avoid conscription into the First World War. Finally, in May 1916, Vanessa found and moved into Charleston House, not far from Asham, and several landscapes and interiors exist from her stays there. Bell's next major work was The Tub of 1917, using Mary Hutchinson as a model. Hutchinson and Bell had not got on well when they met, but nonetheless, Bell had painted her portrait in 1915 and used her as a model for Nude with Poppies in 1916. Bell described The Tub as her big bather picture in a letter to Fry, and as such, it participated in a modernist tradition of pictures of bathers, including Cézanne's, Matisse's, and Duncan Grant's version of a standing nude in a tub of 1913, also entitled The Tub. After the war, Bell and Duncan Grant travelled to Saint-Tropez, and later to Cassis, with Bell producing more figurative work, including Interior with a Table, painted in La Maison Blanche. Bell also travelled to Venice in 1926, and her work, Venetian Window, echoes the theme used in the Saint-Tropez interior, that of the external world viewed from the interior perspective, common to much modernist work, including Virginia Woolf's writing. The same construct was used in this work, The Open Door, painted at Charleston in 1926, and this informs much of her later work as well. Tragically, Julian Bell was killed soon after joining the Spanish Civil War as an ambulance driver, and Virginia Woolf committed suicide in 1940 under the threat of Nazi invasion. Also during the Second World War, Vanessa, Duncan Grant and Quentin Bell were commissioned to decorate Berwick Church, 3 miles east of Charleston House. Angelica Bell posed for the Annunciation and the Nativity, with Charleston used for the walled garden behind her in the former work, and the East Sussex South Downs in the latter. For the red dress, Bell used a photograph of her mother from 1864, taken by her mother's aunt and godmother, the photographer Julia Margaret Cameron. This work, as well as the other numerous paintings of her children, Julian and Angelica, and later her grandchildren, including Henrietta, pursue the theme of the family in conjunction with the theme of time. And again, this resonates with Woolf's ideas in her book To the Lighthouse. For the 1951 Festival of Britain, Bell was commissioned, along with 59 other artists, to produce a canvas of at least 45 inches by 60 inches. A preparatory sketch for the work used Olivier Popham, who would later marry Quentin Bell, as the model for the seated figure. The finished version for the festival replaced Olivier with Angelica, and the children on the floor represented Angelica at the age of 3 and Angelica's daughter, Amaryllis. However, after the work was left unsold after the festival, the work was overpainted with Vanessa's self-portrait. Hence, the work, as a palimpsest, represents Bell's theme of the generations. Of the work, what Vanessa said that she liked about it was that it was down to earth, describing it as simply figures at the drawing room window, which is open on the garden with sun outside. All very terre-à-terre. But then I'm interested in terre-à-terre subjects and encourage myself by thinking that many good artists have been.